usual reminder, and welcome to everybody in the room and a number of you virtually. Usual stuff in terms of the meeting will be recorded. Remember to introduce yourselves when you first come to speak. And beyond that, I think we just crack on. So apologies for absence, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Kevin Murphy, Board Support Manager. The apologies today are Kirsty Darwin, Chair of the Board, Brian Baverstock, Board Member, and Assistant Chief Officer David Farries, Director of Authority. And just to note, we also have one observer, Mr. Robert Scott from HMFSI. Thanks,
Kevin. Welcome, Robert. Consideration of and decision of any items to be taken in private. Is there anything anybody wants to raise? No. Good. Thank you. Declaration of interest? No. Excellent. That takes us on to minutes of the previous meeting from Tuesday, 23rd of August. Any changes, comments on these? I'll go through them in the usual fashion, page by page. So page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, and finally page 7. Content. So we will take them as an accurate record of the meeting on the 23rd of August. Action log, Kevin.
Yes, Chair. The action log is contained within pages 12 and 13 of the pack. Currently only has one action, which has been completed. And if in board are content, we could remove that from the action log.
Happy? Yep. Thank you. Decision log?
Yep. The decision log is contained from page 14 of the pack. Has the decisions for the last 12 months contained within it, and the first 6 of which we now have the impact assessments narratives contained within, and that concludes the information on the decision log.
Thank you.
Chair.
Yeah.
Just Malcolm Payton, board member. Just a very minor point at the end of the decision board. It says the board approved the strategy plan. Is that the strategy plan or the strategic plan? Just in case someone thinks it's a different document. Thank you.
Okay. Noted. Chair's report. Clearly, this is Kirsty's report, but I just wanted to mention a couple of things. One is the NGC meetings that there clearly, as everybody is aware, been a lot of activity in that area. And again, as everybody is aware, the ballot, FBU are going to ballot on Monday with a recommendation to reject. And Stuart and Ross will cover in more detail in the private session under the agenda item on industrial relations. The other thing I just wanted to mention, it is in Kirsty's report, is just the 2 away days that we had at Ayers Castle at the end of September, and just what a valuable and constructive 2 days they were. And thanks everybody for their input into those 2 days. That takes us on to Ross, Chief Officer's report.
Thanks, Chair. Morning all. Ross Haggart, Interim Chief Officer. The report that's in front of you is the usual diary update for September and October of this year. There's probably, happy to take any questions. It's been quite a busy couple of months, as you'll see from the report. I'll highlight a couple of particular things that are particularly prominent at the moment. You mentioned pay and the uniform staff pay. We're coming to the end of a ballot for support staff pay as well, so we will hopefully understand in the next few days what the outcome of that ballot is for support staff. Myself, Stuart and John were at the Criminal Justice Committee at the Scottish Parliament yesterday given some evidence to support their pre-budget scrutiny, which had probably additional significance this year because of the resource spending review acting as the backdrop for that. So we gave evidence, written evidence and then oral evidence yesterday. And the other thing that's not within my diary but is worth board members being aware of, the Fire Brigades Union have got a rally at the Scottish Parliament which is starting at 11 o'clock today as part of their political campaigning roundabout pay and budgets within the Fire and Rescue Service. So nothing else for me to highlight, but happy to take any questions on anything that's within the update report.
Just before we go to questions, I just wanted to say really well done in terms of the three of you for Justice Committee yesterday. I watched it last night and your level of preparedness was very clear. The response is really good. I thought the tone was excellent, so thank you.
Thank you, and can I also add thanks to Mark and his team as well for the written submission, which clearly set us on a very good trajectory in terms of the oral session. Thank you. Yeah.
Questions for Ross? Nick?
Thanks, Chair. Nick Barr, board member. Ross, or anyone else, have we got any indication of intention for industrial action with the predominant ambulance service unions?
My understanding, and if I have got this wrong, apologies, but my understanding is that the ballot for industrial action within the NHS in Scotland has been suspended pending consultation round about the new pay offer that's on the table for NHS staff. So that's as far as I know on that, Nick.
Okay, thank you. I think that's unison, isn't it? I think, I'm not sure, but I just wondered because obviously there could then be implications for us within that as well. But that's fine. Thanks very much.
And that's the 7%, is that right? Is it? Oh, it's 2,205, isn't it? Right.
Nick, just for some additional assurance, the Strategic Resilience Partnership met on Tuesday and the subject of industrial action across the public sector was discussed and plans that we put in place to support each organisation should industrial action take place. So those discussions are taking place.
Just remember to introduce yourselves before speaking, just for the tape and the minutes. Any other questions for Ross? No? Excellent. That takes us on to the committee reports. The first one, the meeting was, as you can see, on the 15th of August for the Change Committee, and the minutes are attached. There is another meeting a week on, 2 weeks today, in fact, but happy to take any questions on the minutes of the Change Committee from August.
Chair, sorry. Yeah. Just a minor one. I noted there's a part, I think it's paragraph 823 here. It said something about the programme values different from the service values, and that was explained at the committee. I just wondered if we could have that explanation again here. I thought that'd be useful.
Was that PT FAS?
I think I've
yes, it was PT
yes. Let me find the right page.
Yeah, from well, David's probably better positioned to answer it than me. My memory was that there had been conversations with a number of the stakeholders and project team, and that there was a slightly different set of words used in terms of the values. David, do you recall, was there anything more to that?
So, David Lockhart, Director of Service Development. I don't recall, but what I'll do is I'll make inquiries and get back to you in terms of that statement.
I mean, I think my slightly easy memory from August was that it made perfect sense.
Certainly, the minute records that it was understood by the committee, yeah, so very happy with that. I was just interested. I think it's useful to understand that point.
So action on David then to just clarify in a wee bit more detail. That takes us on then to Audit and Risk Assurance Committee. The meeting is the 13th of October, and in Brian's absence, Leslie, are you happy to give us an update?
Yes, I am here. I'm conscious that Tim, I think, had his hand up on the previous item.
Oh, apologies, I missed that. Tim.
That's no problem, Chair. I'm way down here. I know it must be tricky to see my little wavy hand. So Tim Wright, board member. Thank you. Yes, it was a question on change committee minutes. It was section 8.1.3, which is page 33 of the pack. There's the section says the noted that the committee commented on the advanced stage of the project. In fact, this was the first time the committee had been made aware of it. Can you just clarify with me, it's the first time that the committee had been made aware of the low carbon appliance project or the budgetary aspect of that project?
The low carbon appliance project.
Lovely. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Leslie.
Thanks, Leslie Bloomer, board member and deputy chair of the audit committee, which is why I'm giving this update. So we met on the 13th of October, and particular points I would want to pull out for the board are that we considered the annual procurement report, and that is on this agenda later today. We had a full discussion on that, including consideration of community benefits, and the impact of spend on the economy, and the committee were happy to recommend it to the board for approval, but that will come up later on the agenda today. Turning to internal audit, we are now routinely considering the scope of reviews before they start. So we considered the scope of the internal audit review looking at corporate performance management. And we also looked at the scope of the review planned for training. There was a bit of debate about the breadth of that, but a conclusion that what was proposed was the right scope. We then went on to look at reports of internal audit, and we considered 2 reports. The first on revenue maximisation, and we were content with that report, but we did consider at some additional to that report intellectual property rights, and I think there'll be some background discussions going on related to that, but the report on revenue maximisation was a good, sound report. We also reviewed the internal audit report on a post-pandemic response, and that looked at the response to the pandemic and also looking at the recovery, reset and renew programme. The remainder of the agenda was our standard agenda items, so looking at progress in implementing audit recommendations, and also we had an update from Robert from His Majesty's Fire Service Inspectorate. I can get that right. That's all. Happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. Any questions? No? Good. And that takes us on then to People Committee. Mary.
Good morning, Mary Wiley, board member. We took obviously the assurance reports within the People Committee. There's a couple of things just to highlight. I suppose the ongoing pressures around staff turnover, particularly within support staff, and I'll pick up on that in a second or two. But also the committee just wanted to highlight the fact that we also had, for the second quarter in a row, 0 RIDDOR incidents as well. And again, it's an achievement for 1 quarter. It's an incredible achievement for 2. So congratulations to everybody involved in that. We did take a verbal update and we'll continue to do so around the staffing solutions team, and they're looking at various work packages that are particularly focused on areas of pressure within staffing matters, including staff support turnover. We were delighted to see that the health and safety data summary had come to the committee already, and we're anticipating seeing the first draft of the report as well in December too. So that's really welcome in terms of a much greater rapidity for reporting at the end of the annual year. We also took an update and an agreement around the provision of rehabilitation and physiotherapy arrangements and an input around the pod vision, as well as a very welcome risk spotlight around the OC arrangements for staff and some of the pressures that exist there. And that was actually particularly encouraging because Gary was able to actually provide a little bit of assurance that there are some positive signs coming out of some of the aspects of the data trends within the OC. We shouldn't get too ahead of ourselves. There's still a lot of work there to make sure that we are supporting the teams there as fully as we can. But there were some positive aspects to that discussion, so we really welcomed that as well. So that's everything, I think, for the moment. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Mary. Any questions on that update? Okay, thank you. Nick, Service Delivery Committee.
Thanks, Chair. Nick Barr, Service Delivery Committee Chair. The minutes of the meeting that was held on the 30th of August at Blackness Road Fire Station in Dundee are in the information pack for this meeting, so I won't spend too much time on this at all. Just a couple of points literally about this is that we usually run through the HMFSI action plan updates. We did that again this time, but on this occasion we're really, the Service Delivery Committee noted that the team were really looking to close down some of those longer term actions and move things on with a sort of a pathway to being green, particularly when those actions are relating to bodies or circumstances out with the services control, such as Wave and the Home Office, etc. So that the SDC encouraged this. We did a risk spotlight on the GTAC tablets, and really suffice to say that that and other aspects that we have discussed show a vast amount of interdependencies, particularly around CCMS. So just something the board needs to be aware of generally across the piece. I know we already do discuss that, but that was prominent within our meeting as well. In the private session, we looked, as indicated on the minutes, we looked at the operations control systems resilience once again, and we have looking further forward now, we have an assurance workshop planned for Monday the 21st of November at 1400, and other board members, if they wish, are invited to join that. And our next meeting will be at, hopefully it'll be at Johnston OC, and will include a home fire safety visit, deep dive, and a further update on industrial action. And that's my brief complete. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Nick. Questions? Nope. Okay, thank you. So that brings us to agenda item 11, combined risk and performance report Q1 progress. Just a reminder to everybody that this was circulated as part of the pack for the 9th of September board meeting, which for obvious reasons was cancelled. Mark.
Thank you for that, Fiona. Mark McAteer, Director of Strategic Planning, Performance and Communications. So this is the Q1 report, delayed as you said, Fiona. And just to bring it to attention, obviously, to the board members and take any questions that you've got on it. What I propose going forward for Q2 onwards is I'll bring Chris Fitzpatrick into this meeting, and he can pick up some of the detail that sits behind some of the statistics. Colleagues who are on the Service Delivery Committee will know how he engages with that committee around about that, so we'll do that going forward. Unfortunately, the clash of diaries this morning, so we'll do that going forward. Not so important with a Q1 report, but I think as the year develops, that'll be useful context and background information for board members. Rather than going through the report in its entirety, maybe just pick out a couple of issues for myself in areas that I've got responsibility for from the report, and then maybe ask David to come in on something as well. You will have seen on page 8 of the report itself, there was an issue around the quality assurance of some of our casualty data. Just to give you a bit of background on that, we do a sample check as part of a quality assurance exercise on all our IRS records, and we've noticed in the last year or so that there's a discrepancy in some of the reports between the narrative within the report, where we will often talk about casualties, and then some of the data that's been returned within the IRS report. So the number of actual casualties being reported was lower than what we were seeing from some of the narrative comments. So we would then go back, speak to the station, the crew involved, get clarity on that, make the adjustment, and then get the number right. So because that discrepancy was there across a number of months, we had a discussion with colleagues in service delivery who attended their continuous improvement forum. And David Faries has been very strong with us and saying, right, we need now to take action at station level to ensure the veracity of the data first time round. The quality assurance exercise shouldn't be picking up flaws, we need to get the data entry correct. So we're working with colleagues on the SIF. We're in the process of pulling together some training packages that will go out to the stations so that crews and station commanders are aware of the necessity of the data, how we use the data, the responsibilities for getting the data right. So we'll put those training packages together and we'll get those out to the stations as soon as we possibly can. So we're confident that we'll close down the issue. We know what the numbers actually are. We'll make the corrections in the records themselves, but it's just to make sure we get that right first time round. We're taking those actions jointly with service delivery.
What was the root cause? Just lack of understanding, or what?
Bit of that. There's a bit of lack of understanding, I think, with the IRS itself, some stations. There's also, it's not unique to our systems, it's a drop-down menu, and there's a human tendency just to click the first box that comes down. So it's again just to work with people to say, you need to get this right, check when you put in, there was a casualty. Most of the casualties you really are, they're minor things, so it's maybe someone who's getting oxygen at the scene. It's nothing significant. Make sure your numbers correspond with your narrative. It's as simple as that. But it's something we'll work on. It's a human behaviour issue. We'll work to get it right with staff going forward. And it's something we'll pick up into the whatever the successor is going to be with the IRS going forward. But how do we minimise that scope for human error creeping into a system that's quite important, obviously, for our data. Second issue I would draw attention to is on page 23, and it's about the comms and engagement strategy. That's an annual operating plan action. It was down to come to the board earlier in the year, and we've kind of held it back. I would now propose to the board that we, rather than bring it at the next meeting, which we were hoping to do, it says August in the pack, that's a typo, hold it back perhaps to the new year to see the outcomes of the spending review for ourselves, because how we're going to communicate in the context of the spending review. The principles, I think, will still be the same principles, being open and transparent, etc., etc. Making sure that our staff know what we're going to say before the public, that kind of thing. But in the context and the pressures that we will face, are likely to face within the spending review context, how we engage with key stakeholders is something I think we should be reflective upon, and how we message to key stakeholders, whether that's public sector partners, whether that's the third sector, whether that's communities themselves. I'd like to refresh the strategy with that in mind, rather than bringing it before Christmas and then perhaps coming back early in the new year to say we might want to think about this again. So with the board's indulgence, I'll hold it off, maybe have a strategy day discussion once we see the outcome of the spending review, and then we can reflect that into the formal document we'll bring in the new year and get that signed off for next year, if that's okay with board members.
Okay.
Other issue I'd maybe draw attention to relates to cyber security on page 25. You'll see there's been some improvement in the position on that, but rather than me speak to it, maybe ask David to give a little bit of background to some of the issues that sit behind the cyber security issues.
David Lockhart, Director of Service Development. Board members will be aware that cyber security is an annual operating plan action for 21-22. That was based upon the outcome of the penetration testing that took place back in June 21. During 21-22, a significant amount of progress was made in terms of dealing with these outstanding actions from the penetration testing. As we moved into a new financial year, it was then included as a new annual operating plan action, but any outstanding actions from the penetration testing in 2021 were carried forward, and the current position is that we have 6 high vulnerability penetration test actions that are being progressed through. The reason why they haven't yet been completed is due to the complexity of the actual technical requirements of the adjustments that need to be made within our systems, but also because of a capacity issue within ICT that we've obviously highlighted over the last few months. So progress is being made, and we hope to knock another one of these vulnerabilities off in the next week or so. In relation to the next set of penetration testing for our systems. That takes place in November this year, and we hope that we will see improvement in the actual number of deficiencies that are identified, if any at all, given the work that we've done over the last year and a half. In terms of training, that has progressed since Q1. We're currently sitting at 90% compliance or completion rate with regards to the cybersecurity training, with this year's module being released next week, and we will monitor that closely for its progress. So it was just to highlight the progress that's been made and clarify the situation in terms of the relationship between the 21-22 annual operating plan and the 22-23 annual operating plan. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Leslie?
Thank you. Thanks, Mark, and thanks, David, and thank you for picking up a couple of points I had raised by email. So thank you for that. If I can come back on a couple of points. Firstly, on the cyber security, I think getting the training levels up to 90% is fantastic, David, and I think it's really helpful that we're continuing to make progress on the high vulnerabilities that you mentioned. I think there's a couple of points for us just to consider, I think. Firstly, the progress in cybersecurity was red in the last AOP. When it transferred to this AOP, it suddenly all became green. And I just think because it was a new action. So there's something about transferring things that are overdue in one AOP, kind of developing a new action, which is the same as the previous one, but things become green. So that just gives us a bit of a challenge to kind of track things through. So Mark, I can see you taking a note. There's maybe something to consider for when we next go into the AOP. The second point is we know the situation in ICT in relation now to the implementation of the results of the penetration testing from June 21, and whilst it's good that we're down to 6 high vulnerabilities, there are still 6 high vulnerabilities, and I just wonder, it's a question perhaps of the Integrated Governance Forum, is where we pick that up. I know ARAC in the past has looked at IT issues, and I don't know whether or where is the best place for us to have a further discussion on that, if indeed colleagues feel a further discussion is needed. I note and welcome that we've got another round of penetration testing in November. If I can come back on Mark's point, again, I really welcome David Farry's and colleagues getting a grip of the discrepancy in the casualty reporting. We've been delighted to see the drop in casualties. And I just wondered, Mark, if you had a sense for the scale of the discrepancy.
We're doing a historical check at the moment, so if I could maybe come back at the next meeting and I'll give you a figure on that. I wouldn't want to say at this stage exactly what we think it is, because we're not complete on the quality checks yet, but it will mean we will have to go back and retrospectively make an adjustment to the figures on this, so we will pick that up at the next meeting and give you a bit more detail. I know roughly what it's going to be, but I don't know yet precisely what it's going to be, so I would rather wait till we've got a precise figure and give you that, perhaps, Leslie, or I can put it in writing once I've got it to board members.
That's fine, yeah, let's do that.
I will get you.
Happy with that, and again, I think it's very good that the issue was picked up and is being dealt with, so that's excellent. Thank you.
Nick?
I was just going to add that that's also being reported back into the SDC.
Yeah, okay. And on your point, Leslie, in terms of where discussed the cybersecurity stuff and currently being discussed at ARAC, we'll take an action to put that on the next IGF agenda, just to have a chat about it. Oh, who's waving? Oh, hi, sorry, Angelina, apologies.
Angelina Foster, board member. This relates to page 5 of the report 52 of our pack. It's the home fire safety visit number. I'm going from memory here, but I think in a previous version of this report we've also been given a line after the actual number this year relative to last year. We were given a very important insight, I think, which related to the proportion of these visits that were to higher risk, more vulnerable households relative to previous years. And also going from memory, that was down coincidentally and confusingly also 14%. But I see we don't have that here. So my question is there a reason for that? I personally think it's a really important insight for us to keep in mind. And do we know if that sort of sub-metric, so to speak, is now moving in the right direction or not? Because I think it's, to me, feels quite material relative to our strategy. Yeah.
I'll defer to perhaps Stuart on where we are, the position at the moment, but I'll take a note that for that particular metric, we'll get that built into the narrative going forward. So that it's
if others agree, it's worth holding on to.
Definitely, yeah. See Leslie.
I don't, sorry, Stuart Stevens, Interim Deputy Chief Officer. I don't know that figure to hand. I think that this measure that is reported here, because that was agreed through the performance management framework, that the measures that you're referring to go to Service Delivery Committee, and this is the high level on fire safety visits, but absolutely agree that the value of it being reported to the board is
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
That's what's happened.
Oh, Nick, thank you.
I think Tim was first.
Oh, I'm on a separate item, Nick, so if yours is related to this.
To address Angelina's point, and a point that has been discussed off table from the SDC in advance of the review of the home fire safety visits, which is coming to the next SDC. I know there are some thoughts about redesigning the way in which we're looking at home fire safety visits in the future, particularly towards high vulnerable groups. So at the next SDC, we'll be looking at that and listening, welcoming Stuart and the Service Delivery Directorate's view on prioritisation of high vulnerable groups.
That's helpful. Thanks, Nick. Angelina, happy with those responses? Thank you. Tim.
Thanks, Chair. Mine's a little question on the portfolio office project, which is page 58 of PAC. It's again, I guess, the enduring recruitment issues. I'm just conscious of how central completion of the CRIM model is to so many other projects that we have dependency on it. And this is a highly specialised post that appears, I'm guessing, is difficult to fill. I'm just wondering, are there steps that can be taken to make the post more attractive so that we can fill it and make sure that we don't fall behind because of that, relying on that particular skill set not being imposed?
Thanks, Tim. Stuart?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, Tim, and we have made a decision at the last Senior Management Board to pursue a consultant to come in and provide that specialist analysis, because we're finding the marketplace very challenging to identify an individual for that period of work. But given the significance of that work, we're absolutely going to get the appropriate resources in to support it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mark, is that you?
That's me, yeah.
Excellent. Oh, Mark.
Sorry, Malcolm Payton, board member. No, I'd just like to check the normal timescale for this. I appreciate that this report has been delayed, so some of the information is out of date. When would we normally expect to get the quarterly report? How soon?
It would normally be August, September. But obviously, there's disruption this year because of the additional meetings we were having around it, so spending really. So normally around about that period.
I suppose I'm thinking of every quarterly report. Will it be a month after?
It takes us 6 weeks after the end of the
6
quarter
weeks,
to finish the quality check on the data, and then we get into the next board meeting thereafter.
Yeah, because I'm conscious there was one I was looking at, the Safe and Well project, but the detail doesn't matter, but it said something had been delayed by 6 weeks, but we're now 10 weeks beyond that kind of thing, and there was one or two I could kind of ask for an update, but I know it's coming through other processes.
In a few weeks, so we'll pick up some of the detail.
Kind of exceptional circumstances that funds been delayed, but so 6 weeks roughly.
6 weeks to do the quality check on the data, and then the first meeting thereafter. That's when it comes.
Yeah, that can still be. Yeah, it still means it might be 2 months out of date, but okay, thank you.
Yeah.
As well as the quality assurance on the data, it's also getting the data inputted, particularly from an incident perspective, incident recording system and things like that. So there's a natural lag between crews attending incidents, having an opportunity to input the data in the first place before that team can even undertake the quality assurance of it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sure, again, Mark, board forward plan schedule, and you're looking for the board to approve this.
Yes, looking for board approval of the schedule through next year for board meetings, and then obviously the schedule of the committees that sit within that thereafter. So it's just here for board approval, and then if so, we'll get that into everyone's hands.
Any questions on the forward plan?
Maybe also say that given the circumstances as we've done this year, we'll look to put in additional meetings of other strategy days or formal board meetings. Again, we'll hold that in mind for next year as well. Should we need it, we'll obviously insert additional days given the issues around resource spending review, etc.
I mean, I guess, you know, we're approving of it, it's certainly not set in stone clearly in terms of its, it will move accordingly.
It will change.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And agenda item 13, the annual procurement report, and just a reminder, as Leslie's already said, this has been to audit and risk and was well received. John, and this is for approval as well.
Good morning, board members. John Thompson, Acting Director of Finance and Procurement. So delighted to present the annual procurement report for 21-22. And it's been mentioned, Leslie has highlighted that it's been scrutinised at the ARAC on the 13th of October, and it's presented to the board for final approval and subsequent publication. I would remind board members, the length of the report, I guess, but the format of the report is prescriptive, and it's in line with Scottish Government's guidance and legislative requirements. I would also highlight that the service follows best practice, and it's in line with our overall procurement strategy, where we want to improve transparency of information being published about our procurement activity. And there's therefore a number of detailed appendices which have been included, which actually exceeds when we look across what other public sector organisations do. But as I say, it's in line with best practice, and it's one that we should welcome. Apology that therefore means that it's a lengthy document for board members to read through. Just wanted to highlight a few things, if I may, Chair. So first of all, at 3.2, there's been 45 regulated procurements undertaking, and the overall value is £186 million. There has been quite a significant amount of work that's been undertaken with the supplier development programme and around the HART facilities management contract, and we have subsequently been shortlisted for an award for our contribution around that in terms of the procurement award. 85% of our procurement activity is delivered via collaborative contracts. There is a slight increase in terms of the expenditure that we are offering to SMEs, that's at 33%, and that in terms of Scottish-based businesses, 47.25% of our spend, £46 million, has been spent with those Scottish-based organisations over the period. We have obviously made a commitment to climate change through our procurement activity, an example being the low carbon appliance, and you'll see that probably repeatedly through the document. And also that we have identified and separately ring-fenced funding via the environmental team to progress those climate change initiatives. Plus, I would also highlight that we are training particularly the procurement staff on climate change literacy as part of an ongoing programme to make sure they are fully aware of climate change and how that then is impacting in terms of their procurement activity going forward. We have a commitment to fair working practices, and we have also undertaken project bank accounts. The West Arc that you see here is another example of where we've operated a project bank account, and that just means that subcontractors are paid earlier at the same time as the main contractor, and obviously that's really important, especially just now in terms of the current economic climate. So again, I hope that would be welcomed by more board members. Quite a lot of community benefits, and that was discussed fairly extensively at ARAC. And the other thing I wanted to cover want to highlight was a slight reduction in the non-contract spend, 6.4% down to 5.4%. Not as much as I would have liked, but that it's good to see that we're on a trajectory at least to try and reduce non-contracted spend. There was also 17 non-competitive actions, so that's where we went directly to the market and placed a contract, and that totaled £237,000. And then one final thing, if I may, Chair, just to thank Leslie. Leslie highlighted that she had there was a discussion around gross value add activity, and subsequently I've met with Leslie and she's offered me some guidance as to how we could take that forward. So thank you, Leslie, for that, and we will be progressing that in due course. And that's me. So I open it up for questions, recognising that it's already been happening.
Thanks, John, and thanks, Leslie. Any questions for John? No. So, you again, resource budget monitoring report.
Okay, I should have said this is the first of 5, but the second of 5 in terms of reports. So present the resource budget monitoring for the first half of the financial year, and I'll give you the year-to-date position and the forecast position. Talk about budget environments, budgeted savings, and kind of financial risks. First thing that I wanted to mention, though, is that hopefully board members will have seen a change to the financial reporting format, and this has been trailed initially through a strategic leadership team in terms of the financial reporting, and I got good feedback, and I refined it for this board version. The intent behind it was both to listen to what board members said previously, which was there's a lot of narrative and a lot of volume. Could you do something about that? So with that intent, I've managed hopefully to reduce the volume of narrative, but still give a kind of clear understanding of the financial position, and give areas that the board have, cover areas that the board have noted interest previously. So not hopefully taking away anything, but trying to present it in a clearer format, and one that reduces the narrative. And I would therefore welcome board members' views, perhaps at the end of my presentation. So moving on to the actual financial position itself, for the board to note at 3.3 that the current financial position in the half year is an underspend against budget of just under £1 million at 0.952 million. The forecasted year-end position at this stage shows an underspend of 1.911 million. I have to now move on to the next bit of this, so don't get too carried away with an underspend being forecast. And unfortunately, there's a couple of things that I'll highlight later on. So first of all, in terms of the forecast highlights that the employee cost overspends are expected in terms of control at 0.124 million, and other employee costs of 0.140 million. There are respective underspends for the whole time at 0.911 million, on call at 0.67 million, and support at 0.621 million. On the non-employee costs, the main overspend forecast is on transport costs, and that's at a forecast of 0.844 million, and a small overspend on third party at £19,000. There are underspends forecast in respect of property costs at 0.297 million, and on supplies and services 0.370 million, and additional income 0.160 million. The board should note that the forecast includes 0.670 million related to the mini budget, and if you remember that mini budget, which was obviously prominent, but there was a reversal in the mini budget around national insurance, and the 1.25% contribution from employers. So that is now included within this forecast, because it's money that we had budgeted for that within our plans, but that has now been reversed at least until now. Who knows? The forecast, however, I think this is the key point, the forecast does not include any pay offers for this year, as these are still under negotiation, and also that would significantly change the position and move us from an underspend position to a potential overspend position. But we're also working with government around the support that we may have to support us this financial year on that matter. Pause. Moving on to budget environments. There were no budget environments in the month of September, but in August there was two main environments. Firstly, through the strategic leadership team, we agreed to move 727,000 of year-to-date savings allocated to support staff, and they were reallocated in line with the kind of recruitment profile. So board members may remember that in setting the budget there was effectively unallocated saving around the recruitment profile because we couldn't identify exactly where there would be slippage in recruitment, but we knew it would happen. So what we are effectively saying is, as part of the kind of quarterly reviews, when we identify that underspend in each of the directorates, we're then whipping that off them and allocating it back to what we anticipated in terms of the recruitment profile. And the other environment was a drawdown of £53,000 from contingency to cover an employee tribunal case. In terms of budgeted savings, the forecasted savings is above budget at 6.106 million compared to the budgeted savings of 5.822. The RAG status, you may have noticed, I've changed it from a PRAG status to a traditional RAG status. And there's two elements which have been identified as red. First is transport, where the increase in fuel prices has outweighed the potential savings, and the other is in the agency costs, but that has to be seen in conjunction with support staff vacancies as previously. There is one item that I would highlight which is a kind of deferred cost, which relates to the transitional costs associated with the command and control project, so it's identified there. Again, it was one of the recommendations from Deloitte that we highlight where there is deferral of costs as well, so that's us now reflecting that position. In terms of the final point, which is around risk, the financial risk, the main financial risk to the service this year effectively is around an overall overspend. So despite the fact that we have an underspend to date, and that's primarily down to pay awards in the year, and as I say, whilst the kind of forecast looks positive, it will be dependent on those negotiations and conclusions, and therefore that's the overall financial position as at the end of September, and I'll open up for questions too.
Thanks, John. Any questions for John? Just in terms of the, sorry, Leslie, on you go.
Thanks, John. Just to pick up on the 727,000 environment, that then is a shuffling. It's not a total of 727 that is moved from one place to another then. It's a kind of shuffling of smaller environments. Is that right?
Yeah, so, yeah, just to be clear, Leslie, so we had 1.9 as the effectively a budgeted saving that we're holding in corporately as a kind of corporate finance element. And as we're going through the quarterly reviews, we're saying, well, how much of that can we now reduce? And we've said, well, look, there's 727,000 that we know that to date we can now bank against that budgeted saving effectively. And that budgeted savings already included within those overall budgeted saving positions. So you're seeing the totality of it within the financial reports. It's just more that we are reviewing on a kind of quarterly basis. I anticipate that we will have more to reallocate during the year, so that we get back to that 1.9 that we budgeted in terms of that recruitment profile. Does that explain it okay, Leslie?
It does. Thank you, John. I had a second question, and that was page 194 of the pack, 5.7, and this is the substantial overspend that is being forecast for transport. And I just wondered if you could talk us through what was happening there, and if there's, and what action's been taken to try and kind of keep that down. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Leslie. So that refers to, so obviously within transport there is fuel, and I don't know if you can maybe see the wee graph, but it shows the extent of the fuel, which I think is about £844,000 if memory serves me correctly. And that's wholeheartedly to do with the price increase of fuel. So fuel is up by about 40 to 45%. In terms of price. I actually checked it against volume, so the volumes are similar post-COVID compared to pre-COVID, but really the main reason for the increase is to do with the fuel price increase, Leslie. In terms of mitigations, I guess there's a number of things we can try and do. Obviously we've got a fleet of, and it's mainly the red shiny appliances that cause the challenge in terms of fuel cost. We are moving those appliances obviously to Euro 6 compliant appliances, and ones that are obviously more fuel efficient. And we've got ongoing work in terms of infrastructure to support electric vehicles, so that's another contributing factor to try and reduce our fuel cost. But primarily it's driven by our need to respond, and therefore there is not much we can do, because we have to still deliver our service, and we just have to accept that unfortunately there has been a significant price increase.
Thanks for that. Sorry, I saw that reason written and I just assumed that there must be other reasons within it, but obviously not. So thank you for that. Can I also just say I like the format of the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. Steve and then Nick.
Steve Barron, board member. Like Leslie, I was put my hand up so that I could say that I like the new format of the report, and I appreciate the efforts that have been made to reduce the narrative, to enable us to focus more clearly on the important issues. And I think that the tabular presentation enables us to do our own analysis in a way that probably helps me at least understand the numbers better than reading someone else's analysis of it. So well done and thank you. One suggestion I have, I wonder if you would consider it, is that in the table, which is analysis of budgeted savings, it might be helpful as we go through the year to have a column that says achieved, because some of these will be achieved before the year end, and that would give us some assurance, I think, as to the likelihood of coming in on target at the year end. Thanks.
Thank you. Nick?
I was going to say exactly what Steve has just said, so I won't repeat that. Thank you.
Excellent.
Better format.
Thank you.
Scary, Nick.
Yes, very scary. And even worse, you both just said what I was going to say, so please pass on this. Certainly I find it much easier to digest and target questions, etc. So thank you for that. Any other questions on resource budget? No. Okay. Capital.
So can I just say, I'll take on board the point that Steve you've raised around
the achieved bit.
The achieved bit. I'll get that sorted out. The only other final thing is that as far as financial reporting going forward, one of the things that we're looking to do is link it through to Power BI, and Mark's team and Matt's team are working on that. So that would give us the capability of potentially looking at something a bit more interactive, so you could actually drill down on some of the financials and start to see some of the variance if you really wanted to get into that.
I don't know why I just thought be careful what you wish for.
Yeah. I might put a restriction in there. But it certainly would be helpful, certainly from an SLT perspective at least, to be able to drill down into that. So and it's probably a more effective way of communicating as well. So, or a different way to communicate. Okay, so moving on to the capital monitoring, and this is the capital monitoring report for the half year, similar to the resource monitoring, and I'll cover 4 areas: funding, environments, the overall progress, and RAG status of projects, and also the risk side of things. And I'm going to be supported by Ian Morris as part of this. So in terms of the funding, at 3.2.2, the funding has been increased by just under 2 million at 1.985 million to give an overall figure of 36.64 million in terms of funding. And that's, as highlighted previously to the board, we applied for additional funding to do with the carbon climate change or decarbonisation projects. We submitted a bid for 2.8 million, so we received 1.985, and that offer has been accepted, and we are now progressing those decarbonisation projects. I say we, it's actually Ian's environmental team that are progressing those projects. In terms of budget environments, there has been 250,000 wired to PCs, laptops and peripherals from the Ops Mobilisation website development. Ops Mobilisation and website development. And there's been 71,000 wired to replacement and upgrade of AV kit from the network infrastructure. And those things are a direct result of the website is more around where we are with the overall development of the website and going out to tender on it, but also just reflects those ongoing challenges around supply chain and just saying, well, look, where best can we actually get some spend in the key areas for our capital programme as best with that we can within the ICT area. In terms of progress, it's noted at 3.1. The capital committed and paid to date is 26.815 million, so 73.2% is either committed or paid, which sounds healthy. And as I say, that's against the revised budget of 36.64. The details of the kind of progress to date is noted at 3.4 and 3.5. And I'm just going to pause and ask Ian if he wants to kind of talk around any of the kind of detail of 3.0 and 3.5, if I may.
Thanks, John. Ian Morris, Acting Director of Asset Management. As within the report there, the projects are progressing well. Most of the property ones are progressing well, albeit there is still some challenges with regards to subcontractors and getting access to some of the trades on sites at the moment. The minor works one, 60% of the minor works are completed just now with 10%. Projects are committed with 10% completed so far. Again, that's proving a bit of challenging, but we're confident is high that we'll spend it on all of the minor works. The fleet going forward, we have raised the orders for next year's 20 medium rescue pumps, as it's stated there. The 18 that are on order now have been, the first inspections have been done there. We'll be actually rolling in the door this week to Dundee, so they'll be coming in over the next couple of months. We'll get the 18 of them in, and there's 7 18-ton appliances also completed as well, and we'll be rolling in the door. We have had the 2 TLs, height vehicle chassis, have come back and have slipped from, they originally slipped from March this year to September to December to June next year. So that's the challenges that we've got with regards to some of the specialist areas, which has given us a bit of a challenge. So that will be fed into the next capital outturn report as we bring that forward. The powered rescue equipment has been received, extremely well on stations, on the footprint. They're loving the kit that's going out there. Progressing again at a pace with that. Phase 1 and 2 is completed, and 3 is completed, and we're now moving into phase 4 of this. And we're hoping to have everything completed by the middle of next year, and that will have de-risked the service of HRE, the hydraulic rescue equipment, with the hoses going forward. Happy to take any questions going forward on this one. There is still some challenges. Inflation is causing problems with the prices at the moment being out with normal contract. We had to sit down with John and have a discussion over one of the contracts about it, because it was above what the CPI rate was. But the tenderer, it was very open compliant about it. It showed the open book and what their subbies were charging them as well. So it was a case of either accept the price or walk away. And after a lot of due diligence, we accepted the price, which reduced after further negotiations with the subcontractors as well. What we're also finding as well, there's a lot of order books out there that are keen to be filled, but they're not keen to deliver on the timescales that they're saying. So again, it's proving challenging managing. You know, yeah, you'll get the salesman saying, give me the order, I promise you the earth, and then they'll deliver. So we're having a bit of robustness conversations then that we always do with the supplier chain. I'm happy to hear any questions.
Just on the supply chain stuff, so putting aside, if you can, put aside inflation and price increases, have in general the supply chain problems eased a bit? No, so it's just as bad as it.
It's
and pricing has just made it worse.
Any components in and we use a lot of components with Kevlar. As you know, anything with Kevlar through, which is fire kit, helmets, and various elements, that's getting soaked up into Ukraine at the moment for military grade. So the military contractors will take precedence over that. So that subcontractor, if you want to call it, material of producing Kevlar to make into other materials is dried up completely at the moment. So there are various challenges that's coming across. There's no easing of it at the moment. We have seen some reductions in construction materials. Some of the price reductions in wood has come down at the moment just because of I think they come from South America and various other areas that will probably rainforests were cutting down some of it. That's coming across, and the reductions in the woods come down, but concrete and other materials are still exceedingly high, and the demand for them is exceedingly high as well for it.
Okay. Any other questions for Ian? Angelina?
Thank you. It's not so much a question. I'm not even sure what I expect you to do or say in response to this, but I just really need to articulate the discomfort I get every time I read about our capitalisation of elements of PTFAS. And I've tried to kind of settle myself on it, but every time I read it, I literally feel my eyebrows go whoosh up my forehead. I'm told I have overly expressive eyebrows, so there you go. But so it's the eyebrow factor, really. So I'm not sure if you'd rather sort of settle my nerves outside the meeting or whether there's anything you can see here, but I can't get rid of the kind of every time.
Okay, so could I say that we are obviously reviewing a number of our in-flight projects, and PTFAS is one of those projects that we are looking to consider and review, and obviously we'll then
capitalisation would be part of
that. Would be part of that overall position. Could I also just probably just finish and highlight before any other questions, just in case Leslie's going to ask me this question. But one of the things that board members will perhaps noted or certainly it drew my attention is that Appendix A, that there's been quite a significant slippage. So you'll see that it's 4.144 million in the Appendix A, where the slippage in year to date in comparison to where we thought we were going to be. So that reflects the story that Ian's explaining around challenges, but it's also there's challenges in terms of other projects like command and control projects. So some of those things are now starting to come through into the overall capital programme. I therefore anticipate, and it's already started, Ian and I are, and also the kind of capital monitoring team that are sitting down to review where we are on all these projects, because the fundamental position is that we have the £36 million to spend, and we absolutely want to spend out on that capital, because we know the challenges we've got in terms of lack of investment overall, in terms of backlog and suitability of facilities, etc. But it's the supply chain this year in particular that's given us real challenges. So we're going to have to go and see where we could accelerate, where we could allocate, similar to what we did previously, and we'll obviously give the board more details around that when we've completed that work. So it was just to give hopefully some assurance. We know it's there, and we know that we need to try and do something around all that. So hopefully that's sufficient.
Thank you.
Just to dovetail in there are several levers that we're looking at the moment to bring forward stuff from next year's capital, or to accelerate where we can, and we know there's a solid supply base which is we know is guaranteed. It's not going to be $5 million or later type approach. So we are looking at this at the moment, and there is quite a few there, just to give you that bit of margin of comfort.
Leslie, and then Liv.
Thank you. Thanks for that reassurance, John. I wasn't going to ask about that. I know how good you guys are at making sure that we spend as much as we humanly can in the capital budget, and I think your delivery in that is excellent every year, albeit the challenges grow much harder. It was just in relation to Ian's kind of flyaway point about the rainforests. Just assure me, guys, we do get our wood from sustainable sources. I mean, a yes is fine.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes. Good day.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
Just to follow on from Angelina's point, and just to reassure you, and I can speak to you in more detail sidebar if you like. I had a meeting with the recently appointed client-side partner this week to talk about focusing their attention on a different approach based on the resource spending review. So they'll be coming up with probably three options for reapproval based on versus the original proposal that was put forward, given that circumstances are now fairly significantly different.
Indeed so.
So just to reassure you that that is in hand.
Is that mood inside?
Yes.
Thank you. Any more questions before we move on to the outturn? Malcolm?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for all the information here. I know it's always difficult to get the level of detail right, and we ask for contradictory things. But I quite like in section 3.4, you don't give the finance of each project. I think that's wise because you can get into too much detail. But the one thing I would quite like to see as an exception, under ICT, we've got the command and control future. That's just such a big project that may affect the cash flow of other. So I suppose what I would quite like to see is a separate line saying, when we go back to expenditure, how much of the ICT is CCF and how much is just everything else, just to try and understand when I'm looking at how much is ordered, received, not invoiced, paid. It'd be quite helpful just to separate that one out in my view.
Okay. Any other questions? Nope. Carry on, John. Agenda item 16.
Okay, so report number 4 of 5 in the resource budget outturn for the year 21-22. So the purpose of the resource budget outturn highlights the kind of financial position for that year. I would highlight this was not a normal year. As variances to budget became apparent throughout the year just due to COVID and due to the fact that forecasting itself was actually quite challenging, primarily because a lot of the spend was slower than previous, and therefore we had to take some corrective action towards the end of the financial year. As highlighted at 2.2, there were a number of additions to our funding, being ESMCP. We also got some money for fireworks in terms of the communication around all that. We got funding for rural COVID testing, and we also got recovery of costs for COP26. In line with the previous years, Firelink was eventually paid directly by Scottish Government, and therefore this funding is transferred back to Scottish Government so that they can make the payment, and that's £4.2 million. The revised position in terms of the resource budget is 282.326 million. The actual position subject to audit, because the audit is underway just now, is an underspend of £357,000, which compares very favourably with our original forecast of an underspend of just under £1 million at £979,000. And the fact that we also received an additional 1.88 million, so we received more money in, but we still managed to get our expenditure out the door as best we could. The outturn highlights the main variances, therefore, in terms of outturn. Well, first of all, we had a fairly sizable overspend in terms of hold time at £3.49 million, but that was offset by underspend on the retain side at just over £2 million and support at just over 500,000. We also had some saving in terms of early retirement at 0.784 million, some subsistence savings at 333, and transport costs at 0.576. So based on some of that variance coming through and that slowdown in terms of expenditure, there was a decision by SLT to try and accelerate spend in the year. And this was reflected both in supplies and services with an outturn, an overspend of just under £1 million. And the main variations to the forecasts were in terms of the employee costs, where the whole-time position was just under 250,000 adverse due to overtime. Support was 153 adverse due to the backdating of support staff pay for regrading. There was a favourable swing in terms of the early retirements of 140,000, and there was also a favourable swing when we did the final analysis for the holiday pay accrual of 187. Other adverse swings were on property, and that was just over 200,000, and that was because we were accelerating repairs and adaptations. And also in supplies and services, where again we were 246,000 overspent, and that was again we were trying to accelerate those supplies and services. So that's the fairly complicated report in terms of the resource budget, but it tells the story of the fact that we had both received additional income during the year in terms of budget, in terms of funding, and we've also managed to navigate our way through a position where we've accelerated expenditure to come closer to a final position of being 357,000 underspent.
Thanks, John. Stuart Ballingold, board member. John, just a quick question: is that 282 million now like for this year's budget?
No, so the budget is 294,207. So
is it like for like basis?
Yes, it's. What do you mean by?
Well, when we set the budget at 294, it was, I don't know what the number was, and then it's been adjusted by 4 million here and a bit there and whatever. So does this year's budget need to be adjusted as well, or are we?
No, I suppose what
you might explain this.
Yeah, no, I suppose.
We set the budget based on a comparator for 2022. That comparator has been changed to 282. Does that mean the 294 changes as well?
Thank you, I understand now. So obviously I'm reporting what's happened, and obviously we set the budget and how we allocated the budget for this year was based on our forecasting at that point. We've obviously came to the end of the resource budget for 21-22, and we're saying here is the final position. Much of that is about us trying to take the opportunity to accelerate spend, because we didn't have an overall underspend position. So we're kind of taking that opportunity. It won't have an impact in terms of 22-23. In reality, we've allocated, and you'll see the variances as I've reported as normal, Stuart.
Okay. So I think you're saying they are like for like.
Yes. Sorry.
They are the same.
Yeah.
Sorry, if I can follow up on this, and I'm not sure if it's the same question or a different one. If I can refer you to paragraph 2.2 in the covering report, I suppose the thing it's made me think about, I'm not sure if it's the same question, is where are we in terms of the possible changes that may come in due to these kind of opportunities, and does that affect our budget projections?
Okay, so I think what you're saying is, look, let's understand where we got to in terms of the resource budget outturn, and then therefore is there any areas that we could identify future savings coming out of that?
Savings or increases in funding due to other grants and whatever, I suppose is the...
Yeah. And we're only just starting the budget process now, so we'll start to review all of this information and actually say, well, look, where did we get to in terms of outturn? Where did we get to in terms of what we think that the position is going to look like. We'll also have to understand where we're going in terms of the overall savings programme for the resource spending review. So all of these things will feed into that overall budget position. And we will also consider the fact that we need to try and identify other areas of income as well.
Okay. Thank you. Capital budget outturn. It's your last one.
It's my last one. This is the final capital outturn position for 21-2, and again it's before external audit. So firstly, I'll just cover the changes to funding during the year and then our expenditure. So the original funding was anticipated at 35.979, but again we've managed to secure some additional funding. So we received £500,000 for the low carbon appliance. We also received £3.7 million to cover the PPE accounting. If colleagues will remember that as an outstanding issue from the previous audit. And also we revised our receipts to 1.233 million. Scottish Government also gave us permission to overspend by up to £2 million. And that permission was because the overall justice portfolio was shown that they were going to underspend, and therefore they permitted us to overspend. They weren't able to get the actual budget transfer done, but we got a letter of comfort covering that overspend.
Is that unprecedented, or has that happened before?
We were in a position where we could confirm to government that we could accelerate capital expenditure, and we are always in a position where we unprecedented. We've never had that before, but we were also relied upon, and we have a good track record in terms of delivery. So government were therefore keen to say have some additional funding, and we glad they received that. And it was the West Arc in particular that benefited from that additional funding. So based on the revised funding of 40.478 million, the final outturn is an overspend of 1.971. So it was only 29 million shy.
29,000.
29,000.
29,000, sorry. 29,000 shy.
Only in 29 million coming out of John Thompson.
Which I think is a pretty decent result.
Absolutely.
And it's however important to kind of highlight that you have to see that in the context of, it's great that we got 40.478 million, but we also know that we need on average 63 million to look at our capital in terms of our capital investment. And I highlighted it at section 4, the overall investment over since 2013 is just under 278 million. That's an average of just under 31 million per annum. So our backlog therefore is now 492 million rather than 389 million previously. I felt it was important that we still keep that narrative within the capital outturn report. So I know you've heard this information before, but it's also that this information has been heard by other stakeholders.
And Justice
Committee yesterday. So in section 5 explains in more detail where we've invested 42.449 million and the impact in terms of where it's been applied. And again, Ian is able to give more detail on that should you wish. But that's me, Chair.
Thank you. Ian.
Yeah, I'm not going to get any details in the report there. I'm only going to mention, if the board recall, I brought a paper on the 6th of July 2021 about McDonald Road in a position we were taking over the cost certainty at that time, and they were taking section 42 of the escape framework to produce assessments and for the report. Obviously the site's now finished and dialogue's been ongoing between Pick Everett's, our administrators, and Robertson's Construction. There is a difference in variation on the final costs at the moment, so we're still in negotiations over it. I will bring a paper to the board over the next few weeks and where we are with that. It might be it might be an outcome of that that will end up going to adjudication with regards to the final bill on that, but I just want to make the board aware of it, and we still stand by our position with this regarding this, and there is some dialogue, as I say, ongoing with it, but there's a difference between, at the moment, between 700,000 and 1.3 million of an argument that we're having at the moment with them over the final bill on the site, but it was just to make the board aware of that.
Thanks, Ian. And thanks, John. Any further?
Stuart? But this might not be a question, John. I seem to, there was an issue at the end of it, or when we did the audit, about some sort of accounting policy change. Is that kind of wrapped up in it? Is that something we should be concerned about, or has it just been dealt with?
That's now been dealt with. So the issue was around obviously the accounting for PPE in terms of stock. They wanted it to be included as effectively an asset in the course of construction. And when we move it from stock into AICC, we need separate capital funding. That was recognised as part of the audit process. We put in a business case to Scottish Government. They said happy with that. We'll give you the 3.7, and that removes that issue going forward for us. So it's then resolved.
So that's in the 42. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, John, and thank you, Ian. Ross?
Thanks. I just wanted to really make a comment on the last two reports, well, all of the reports that we've had from John, and particular thanks to John and his team for those reports, but particularly the last two reports. Board members will be aware there's a lot of financial noise in the system this year in particular, but that's not unique to this year. And I think that those two final reports in terms of the resource budget position and the capital budget position, I just want to, as the chief, thank John, Ian, and their teams in particular, but all of the directors to get us into those, what I think are frankly exceptional positions for the end of the last financial year, when there was a lot of noise in the system financially then as well. And to put it into some sort of context, I mean, I don't need to put £29,000 for capital into any context. That speaks for itself. But in terms of the resource position, the figures they are presented by way of an underspend represent less than 1 day running costs for the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. I flippantly said to SLT when this report, the resource outturn report, was presented, that if that year had been a leap year, overspent by a similar amount, very flippantly, but it was to highlight the point that these are very, very fine margins in our budget. So I just wanted to put on record, my thanks and commendation to the teams for getting us into that position, and to continue their excellent work this year with there's so much noise in the financial system. Thanks.
And I absolutely, and same from the board. No mean feat, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, that moves us on then to agenda item 18, reports for information only. Health and safety, sorry, wrong way around. The AOP, I believe I'm correct in saying they're just minor changes in realigning the AOP
just
to
remarking to the new
strategic plan. So no material changes there. And the health and safety policy and policy statement, as Mary's already said, was at People Committee on the 3rd of October. That then takes us on to risk themes. Does anybody have anything they want to flag as a risk theme over and above the very obvious ones that we've been discussing in terms of inflation, supply chains, etc., etc.? Any additionals? Nope. Okay, thank you. Forward plan, Kevin.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, the forward plan is contained at the end of the pack. It's just there for information and comment of the board.
No comments. Good, thank you. And the date of the next meeting, I hope we get a mince pie at this one, Thursday the 15th of December. That ends the public meeting. Thank you all very much, and I suggest that we take a 15-minute break